Hello and welcome. It's Michigan's AutoTalk podcast. We remind you every episode of Michigan's AutoTalk is all about celebrating the automobile and, of course, everything automotive. We're also about helping and supporting you, the car and truck owners, across our great state of Michigan, birthplace of everything automotive. Remember, we're on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, basically anywhere you listen to your podcast. I'm pretty excited about this one. Had an email, as I'm producer Phil Tower, by the way, had an email across my inbox with a look at car depreciation, specifically for the greater Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Battle Creek market. That would be called in TV terms, that would be called a DMA, or designated market area. And there's some pretty eye-opening stats. In fact, the vehicle with the lowest depreciation, I think is going to shock quite a few people. Al, John, you guys have the list, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so you guys have seen the list, and I'm just going to make sure real quickly here. I think I've got Al on twice, so I'm going to go ahead and mute. I'm going to mute one of you because for some reason, this is from iSeeCars.com, and we're really fortunate to be joined by their executive analyst, Karl Brauer. Karl is with iSeeCars.com, and this is a look basically at the values rising and falling for several vehicles. Karl, first of all, welcome to Michigan's Auto Talk. I appreciate you spending a couple of moments with us.
Hey, great to be on with you guys. Always fun talking cars with car guys, so thanks for having me.
So I guess the most obvious question is, did anything on this list surprise you?
You know, as far as the 5-year depreciation, not really. The Wrangler and Wrangler Unlimited 2 and 4-door versions of the same car has just been kind of an enigma in the depreciation world for as long as I can remember. I was at Kelley Blue Book for years before this current role. I was at Edmunds. I'm very aware of depreciation, how much of a role it plays in the average car, and how much people typically spend on it, even if they don't know or think about it until after they've bought the car and they're getting ready to sell. And the Wrangler's always been an enigma. So for it to be at the top doesn't really surprise me. Toyota Tacoma, same thing, right there in your local market. Civic, I think that's also pretty high on the national list. The Camaro is the 5th best car at keeping its value right in your DMA, as you called it. I don't think that was as high nationally, but
I gotta think that the Wrangler, the reason that it's so, everyone likes it is because they've got so much invested into it that they can't turn away. They bought the mud flaps. They learned how to do the Wrangler wave or whatever that thing is. And they've got so much into it because those things driving down the road, they're horrible. They're junk. There's wind noise.
Well, hang on, wait a minute.
Junk.
I heard you say Camaro. You're talking Camaro or Jeep?
Jeep. The Jeep is like the big, everyone likes that. No, they're horrible.
Doesn't matter. Look at the people buying the Broncos, paying through the nose for something with a vinyl top that leaks when you go through a car wash in 2022.
It's all about the cachet. It's all about the cachet. It's just, it's the image. And I get it. I mean, Jeep has that brand affinity. And I'm sure, Karl Brauer, you've studied cars a long time. That's a lot of it. People they just buy Jeeps and they'll pay crazy amounts for a used Jeep, especially if it's the model and got the thing, the engine, whatever they want, right?
Jeep has saved Chrysler like 5 times.
There's definitely a lifestyle element, which is what you guys are talking about, obviously, is kind of what goes along with owning that car and how much value does it have beyond the car itself. And I think, unfortunately, it's true that if you're looking for the best experience going down a paved road at above 40 or 50 miles an hour, the Wrangler is not even, that's kind of almost the worst one in that circumstance, truthfully. But, people love what the cars stand for. They love everyone who buys an SUV, a lot of the SUV popularity is because of what it transmits to others. Look, I'm a big adventurous person. And then the Wrangler's like the ultimate. I'm the ultimate adventurous person. It's like, yeah, but I don't see any mud on the car, even up in the wheel wells. I've never seen any mud on that car. Yeah, but in theory, I'm an adventurous person. So also don't forget the cars are super iconic, right? The car has basically looked like it did since it was in World War II and in those MASH episodes and all. So even when it ages, it doesn't really look like it's aged because the brand new ones look just like the ones from 70 years ago, 80 years ago, I guess it is now. So they age gracefully because there is no sign of aging. So that helps them hold their value.
And what's the take on the Camaro at coming in at number 5, lowest depreciation? It's still it's 20% over 5 years, which I guess I'm guessing a Camaro, a decent, well-appointed Camaro is going to be close to $40,000. So it's going to lose almost $8,000, but still that car shocked me being on the list, Karl.
It does surprise me, and that's where I see a big break from the national vehicles that we saw, and I think that is a reflection of kind of some local, love for the Camaro. I think Camaros are probably very popular in Michigan and maybe even Western Michigan more so for various reasons. And again, another iconic car, another car that brings with it a lifestyle and a message that's being sent when you're driving it. And in that area locally, that's probably a valuable message that people like to send.
Now, just for our listeners, Al and John, these are cars localized. This is the data localized to the Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Battle Creek market. And again, this is the least and worst depreciation after 5 years. The worst depreciating car, this is a doozy. If you paid, and I'm thinking this vehicle new, it competes with a Tahoe and the Suburban and just about every other big, urban domination vehicle. So if you paid, let's just say one of these stickers at $65, after 5 years, it's worth about $30,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This just shows you how messed up West Michigan or Michigan in general. A Camaro, a rear-wheel drive vehicle, holds its value. Everybody loves it. It's only good for 6 months out of the year. You get an SUV that can deal with our winters, and they depreciate. Something's not right.
Yeah.
True. And that's also, it's interesting because you've got the 3-row SUV in the form of a Ford Expedition, and then right below it, you've got number 2, the Infiniti QX80, their big 3-row SUV. Right below that, the Cadillac Escalade ESV, their biggest 3-row SUV. And then below that, the Buick Enclave, and then finally the Audi Q7. All big 3-row SUVs. And
I will say that's always been the issue. When I first got my license, used luxury cars, Lincolns, Mercury's, Cadillacs, very reasonable. They depreciated like crazy, and I love cruising around in my town car. And it was
totally
cheap.
true. It's totally true. Yeah, if you're a luxury buyer, you really are smart if you can wait, and buy one of those things 3 to 5 years old, because you have people who have lots of money and they want the luxury brand and they'll pay whatever it takes to get it. But that same group of people, used, so the cars have no value for that core new car buyer once they're used, because they're used cars. And so they drop hard after 3 years, give or take. And all the people who don't care that it's a 3-year-old or 5-year-old Audi Q7 versus a brand new one, they can pick one up for a song.
Yeah.
But then you get the guys that are hosed with roughly about that time and that mileage. It's going to need some major repair. And now all of a sudden those second buyers or third buyers are stuck and like, oh, I got this for a song and everything is great. And then you get into the nitty gritty and you're like, oh, there's probably a reason they unloaded on this, like that everyone is going to that cloth belly pan so it soaks up all the oil and nobody sees the monster oil drip that is happening. And then all of a sudden you got some poor kid that's like, oh, I got this for a great deal. Yeah, you're gonna need about like $1,500 for timing chains and oil pan and maintenance.
Yeah.
Oh.
They're going to learn the hard way. I want to look at something that really jumped out as well. This shouldn't be a huge surprise. This is used vehicles. This is, again, available from iSeeCars.com, the latest iSeeCars study, and this looks at depreciation and appreciation. These are used vehicles for the Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo market that actually are worth more than their new model. This is pretty crazy after 3 years. So you buy a new Jeep Wrangler Unlimited. Again, that's a top end Wrangler, if I'm correct about that, which is maybe for a lot of people who don't like Jeeps, Mr. Puhek, an oxymoron. That appreciates. That actually appreciates nearly 2% at 1.9%. And I see quite a few of these Toyota RAV4s, and the hybrid model actually goes up in value after 3 years by 1%. So it's worth 1% more. You could actually turn around and probably sell it for more. I don't know what you'd get in a trade.
I know we have customers who've done that, like with Tundras and stuff like that. And we're talking new cars here, but the used car market, it's even more so. You buy it, you drive it for a year, you sell it for more than what you paid for it. And you also have to take into consideration what they're charging for the 2023 model. Because if it's 10 grand more instead of 5 grand more, yours is worth more.
It's a great point. Karl, the cars with the lowest depreciation, this is cars that depreciate the least and most in Grand Rapids, Battle Creek, Kalamazoo after 3 years. I'm looking at this. So this is a breakdown. The final chart you have is average 5-year depreciation, average 3-year depreciation. The lowest depreciation is Subaru Crosstrek. It's not a surprise to see Subaru finally make the list. This is lowest after 5 years. Subaru Crosstrek, the Honda Civic, the Toyota RAV4, the Jeep Wrangler again, and the Chevy Spark. Is that the EV?
Yeah, you've got a couple fat forces at play here too to remember. And also, sorry, on this email that we sent you, this is all 3 years. So even though it says 5-year depreciation, it's 3 years. So we had two charts. The higher one up that we just went through was all 5-year. All of these are 3 years.
Okay, got it.
Both depreciation and lowest and highest for depreciation is 3 and 5 years. So this is all three we're talking about. Subaru's at the top with the Crosstrek for 3 years. So keep in mind that as was mentioned, the pandemic's made everything go crazy. The supply chain issues, you couldn't buy a new car. So people who couldn't get the new car they wanted because there weren't hardly any made because they didn't have enough computer chips just started going to the used car market. This has caused all these prices to go up. This is how you can buy a car and keep it for a year and use it and sell it for more than you paid, as mentioned. And it's nuts. This is not normal, okay? And just want to make sure everyone knows that cars depreciate. They're supposed to go down. Cars are not supposed to be investments. Or if they are, they're supposed to be a bad investment. That's the only kind of investment a car typically is. And they usually lose 50% of their value, give or take, in 5 years, and maybe 33% of their value after 3 years. And you can see that the average in this past, using the past 5 years now, the average was 33% for 5. So from half to a third of the values have been lost now in the last 5 years. And in 3 years, from 33, now we're down to like 17. So that's because most of the last 3 years has been pandemic world, limited new cars, everyone buying used cars. And even the 5 year has been, normally it's 50%. Last year, the 5 year study showed 40%. This year, 33. So as more and more of the pandemic absorbs the last 5 years of car depreciation numbers are falling. And now they're even appreciating, as you mentioned, the RAV4 hybrid and the Wrangler. If you bought one of those 3 years ago, right there in your local area, and you paid the MSRP, you can sell them for a little bit more after. And it's not because you put them in a garage under a tarp and like brushed them with a diaper and stuff like that. You drove them for 3 years, then you sold them 3 years later for a little more than the new car price you paid 3 years earlier. Unheard of. This is not normal, but we're in a weird situation, and it's probably going to shift again. It's looking like used car prices, wholesale prices, and all are finally starting to drop. We're getting the supply chain slowly repaired, and plus there's the economic concerns and higher interest rates. So we're not going to see this for the next 5 years. But the past 2 to 3 years have been completely an enigma.
Right, and thank COVID for that. By the way, 3 year depreciation average for all vehicles across the Grand Rapids Kalamazoo market, 3 year depreciation average is just under 18%. It's 17.9%. So know that on average, and I'm so glad you said this, Karl Brauer, it's normal for cars. Cars are not investment vehicles, and they're not houses. I mean, yes, you've got a couple of really sweet classics, 2 or 3 classics that I'm looking at on your blog. Those, for the most part, if you buy the right vehicle and you take care of it, they can hold their own, or they can appreciate somewhat if you get the right vehicle. But you're talking older, much rarer vehicles, something that you normally don't see in something you buy off the lot, like a Jeep Wrangler or a Toyota RAV4.
Right. And that's what's weird. And, nationally, what went up the most was the Porsche 911. If you bought a Porsche 911 3 years ago for MSRP, it's worth on average $11,000 more 3 years later. Again,
wow.
After driving it too, not just sticking it away for 3 years, hoping it would go up in value, but using it as a regular car, it's $11,000 more valuable today, because that's a specific car that just really went into demand. And real quick, that's why the Camaro and nationally we see things like Mustangs doing well. When there was the lockdown, you couldn't do anything, but there was one thing you could still do. You could still get in your car and drive around. Exactly.
Yep,
so people were like, if all I can do is drive, I'm going to have the most fun I can have driving. And we saw this early in the pandemic. We saw prices for different segments shooting up at different points. And the initial segments that shot through the roof right after the lockdowns were sort of coming off in the summer of 2020 after we've been locked down for 3 months and stuff. Full-size trucks, because everyone was thinking, Mad Max, and I need a truck to keep myself alive. And convertibles. Coupes and convertibles. And I always thought that was so bizarre. It's like, these are like the opposite ends of the spectrum of car functionality. How are full-size trucks and convertibles going up? And it was because both of them appealed to people, and the coupes and convertibles appealed because people said, if all I can do is drive around, if that's the only freedom I've got left, I'm going to have as much fun as I can driving around, and I'm going to go get a fun sports car.
I don't know if you have trucks on your list. Al drives a Ford. He's a Ford F-150 guy. John, you're a Chevy guy. I mean, there's no F-150. There's no trucks on any of these lists. Did you have an overall? Did they show up even if it was, 10 or 12 or 15 cars down the list?
They were on there. I think they were mid-pack.
Yeah, they were on there. You just got to scroll way down on the list.
Yeah. And it's just, again, I think what happened was there's still kind of enough of those out there. That was a priority when car companies can't sell everything they want. Guess what they sell? They sell their highest profit thing. So they were reserving those rare computer chips and the cars they could build with them for the cars they made the most money on. So there was still a drop in everything, including truck sales, and there was more demand than there was supply for trucks as well. But it wasn't as disparate. It wasn't as off as it was for some of these other vehicles. Plus the other thing too that happened in the last 6 or 8 months that also impacted it, that's how things like Chevy Sparks get on here, was gas prices. Gas prices since February, when they shot up, that's when we saw electric vehicles suddenly holding their value much better or going up. The Nissan Leaf used to be the biggest depreciating vehicle. That was that car was just a money pit if you bought one. It wasn't as competitive. It had too low a range, so it just wasn't a good car on the level.
Free.
And all of a sudden they were going up in value because it's like, I don't care how crappy this EV is. It doesn't use gas. I'll take one. And so they went up in value.
Yeah, that's really.
It just shows you how bad it is. I've driven one.
In my opinion, there's right.
They're bad.
People will do, and they will spend a ton of money to save, to get 2 more miles a gallon, and not take into consideration what they're spending on the vehicle to gain that. And as ridiculous as the Wranglers and the Broncos and the Camaros and the Challengers and the 700 horsepower Mustangs are, we people who drive around in full-size pickup trucks for everyday drivers is just as stupid. And I mean, I know people that they don't have a boat or a camper or anything like that where they need that F-150, but I'm from the era where a car had room and you could put 6 people in it and you could go do your thing. And these other cars are so damn small. I would say that 85% of people with half-ton pickup trucks, they're their cars. Mine is. Yep. I tow with it 4 or 5 times a year. The rest of the time it's just my car, but I want it big, bad, and lots of horsepower.
Yeah, Karl Brauer, by the way. Karl Brauer is an executive analyst with iSeeCars.com. I'm looking, Karl, his blog is karlbrauer.com. He also has a YouTube channel. I'm looking at your cars, and Al would appreciate this. You've got a 70 Dodge Challenger 440 RT SE. You've got a 2005 Ford GT. Do you still have that, Karl?
No, you know who owns that car now? I sold it in 2018 to help pay for the new one, is Doug DeMuro. Doug DeMuro has my 2005
okay.
Ford GT.
Okay, and then this is really sweet. You'd even like this, Puke. This is a 74 Trans Am SD 455, which I don't know much about that model, but I got to believe that's a fairly rare.
I like, Phil, how you always have to preface, well, even Buick, you'd like this.
Yeah.
I do like more than Chevy. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, this is a sweet car. Tell us a little bit about the Trans Am, by the way.
So that car was a dream car for me for a long time. I like vehicles that never should have existed, meaning when you know the history, you're like, how did that car or motorcycle, I'm thinking of bikes too, how did that happen? And, everything clamped down by 71, 72 in terms of performance with emissions and insurance and all that. So the muscle car era died, and it died quickly. But there were these crazy engineers at Pontiac that were like, we refuse to give up. And they put all this time and energy into coming up with these Super Duty 455 engines. And there's a lot of 455 blocks out there in different cars, including other Trans Ams. But the Super Duty 455 from oil pan to carburetor and distributor is totally different. It's as specialized and unique versus a regular 455 as like a 426 Hemi is compared to like a 440 or 383, if not more so. And so they engineered these cars to still make crazy power with lower compression and meeting emissions in 73 and 74. So for only 2 years, they made these engines. And then there was a strike, so hardly any 73s were made. And then they made a few more in 74. So there's just not that many that existed. They never should have existed. It was a weird enigma that they even got produced. And I just love those cars as a result of it. I just love that these cars represent the last dying gasps of the original muscle car era because some Pontiac engineers refused to surrender. And that car was fast too, man. I'll tell you, when I've had old Mopars. It was a 74. It was one of the last ones produced. 1974 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am 455 Super Duty.
Okay, now and I'm sure I'm way out of the ballpark. And you speak
of the truth because my roommate in college had a 1980 Trans Am, and it was a 301 turbo that put out like 4 pounds of boost, and it was rated at a whopping 210 horsepower. Bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty awful.
Yeah.
And you got rid of this. Was this the wife made you sell it, or you needed a bigger boat, or what happened with the Trans Am?
For me, you're saying why don't I have it anymore?
Yeah.
What replaced that car, because I'd always wanted one even more than the Trans Am, sadly, was a 911. So I bought a certified pre-owned 2009 Carrera S. This was in 2014, so it was like a 5-year-old car at the time, but it was still CPO. And because I was scared to death of like what you guys were talking about, it's a high-end luxury European car. What happens the first time something breaks? So I had to get one that was CPO, but fabulous car. 2009, Carrera S. That's the 9972 generation. And to me, that's the best the car's got. That was the last generation that had hydraulic steering still instead of electric assisted steering. And I can tell when I drive them. And it was still the small, like relatively short wheelbase. The 911 keeps, like everything, it keeps getting bigger and heavier. So to me, that's when those cars topped out.
Yeah, probably one of the most iconic sports cars of all time. Karl Brauer is an executive analyst with iSeeCars.com. Karl's also been in the automotive industry for 25 plus years. He was editorial assistant for Hot Rod Magazine before launching Super Street Magazine. I remember that as one of its original staff writers in the late 90s. And he was also, for 18 years, editor-in-chief at Edmunds.com. Karl and I were talking before we started episode 84, guys, and I think I may have interviewed him at Wood Radio at least once in the past. I've only done about 5,000 interviews over the last 35 plus years, so I think Karl, or at least one of your cohorts at Edmunds.com, was probably on the air with me. And he also has a great blog, which is iSeeCars, or Karl on Cars, rather. Karl on Cars, and it's Karl, BRAUER.com. We'll have to hear one of those other great car stories, Karl. I know you've got...
With a K.
With a K, by the way. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I was glad you mentioned that. I was going to say it's Karl too, but yeah.
That's the best way to spell it, by the way, as a guy named Phil. I like that spelling of Karl. Thank you so much for joining us. We will make sure we have the links, not only for the iSeeCars depreciation and appreciation stuff, but we'll throw up a link to your blog and your YouTube channel as well. Thanks so much, Karl.
Great being on with you guys. Always fun talking cars. And let me know if you have more stories you want to hear. Always fun to talk.
And by the way, tell Alan John, you told me earlier, what were you driving down the 405 in Southern California earlier today?
Yeah, I had to come back from a photo shoot, video shoot, and it was a 2023 Chevrolet Corvette convertible, not a Z06, but just the regular 495 horsepower one. But 70th anniversary package on it, 3LT top end one with a heads up display and all. So yeah, and as I was saying to you, Phil, you know, California has its own challenges. It's not as cold as Michigan, admittedly, but it has its own challenges. But that was one of those moments where I'm like, you know what? It's November, 23rd, whatever, where it's the week of Thanksgiving. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. And you didn't cruise around in your convertible the week of Thanksgiving typically in Colorado.
You did not.
This is why I put up with California. I was telling myself about 2 hours ago.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, happy Thanksgiving to you, Karl. Thanks so much.
Have a great holiday, you guys. Take care.
You as well.
Hey, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Karl Brauer with iSeeCars.com, and has been with a lot of other online publications. I don't know, guys, any final thoughts about those lists? I was pretty impressed with that list, at least surprised with a few.
It changes with the times.
Yeah. And I think there's so much more technology being put into like a base model of a vehicle is now considered base versus what it used to be. So you can have a simple Camry, CRV, or what have you, and it's got the lane assist, backup camera, all that stuff, and it's got a bulletproof drivetrain, so that thing will stay forever. Versus the old-fashioned Cutlass or whatever, where it was.
Yeah. Interesting list for
I'll
sure.
say any day. I think a modern vehicle trumps the old ones. Everybody's got it's nostalgia. Oh, the cars for the 60s, those were the greatest. It's like, yeah, they were in 1980 when you got your driver's license and it's all you could afford. But the entry level minimalist Geely or Kia is nicer than the fancy ones were back there by 100 times over. Plus they're safer, more economical, and everything else. But I think the Jeep thing, the Bronco thing, the Camaro, the Challenger, the Mustang, all that is that's all nostalgia, and that's what sells, and that's what people want, and those are forever going to keep their high demand. I don't know, 5 times a week somebody comes to me and says, yeah, I wanted to buy a second car. I really want a Wrangler so I can take the top off and take the kids and go up and run around the sand dunes like we used to when we were 18 years old. But they get, you get one with 150,000 miles on it that's 8 years old, and they still want 10 grand for it, and they get it. It's still America. It's still Michigan. It's still the automotive culture that drives the prices on that, because the vehicles flat out aren't worth it, but that's what they get. So it's a seller's market. If you want it, you're going to pay the price.
Yeah. And you're going to pay, ridiculous money for some of these. And I mean, really, really, really ridiculous money. Karl Brauer again with iSeeCars.com. That will put the wraps on episode number 84. We'd love to hear from you. You can drop us a line anytime on Facebook, facebook.com/Michigan's AutoTalk. We are going to start a thread, and you guys don't know about this, but I'm going to throw this up on Facebook over the Thanksgiving holiday. Your first car. So we want people to, and Puhek, Al, we need you guys to find somewhere either a picture of your first car, or at least hopefully steal one from the internet and get one as close as you can. I don't have mine. Mine was a truly awful, one of the worst cars Ford ever made. It was not the Futura. I've told you about my Futura. I had the 78 Ford Fairmont.
I love the Futuras.
Oh, no. This was the basic boxy one with a 4-cylinder. And what did I do?
With the Pinto engine?
Yeah, with a Pinto engine. Yeah.
Was it a 4-door?
It was a 4-door. Oh, it was a terrible car. Yeah, it was a terrible car.
Cool.
So we'll definitely do that. And
that was Ford's answer to Lee Iacocca.
Was it that? Oh, the K car. You're right. It was. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, that was Ford just said, we'll go ultralight. We'll put the Pinto engine and everything, and off we go, because it was Those started in the late 70s, and it was like 80, 81 before they did the Escort and the I forget what the Mercury version of it, but when they started going with the front wheel drive 4-cylinders that they pulled out of Europe, Ford was behind the times by about 3 years. So they just built lightweight little cars and put the Mustang motor in, or the Pinto motor in them.
Yeah. And the only reason I know what the Mercury version of the Escort was because we had 2 of them. And they were not good cars.
Lynx?
It was the Lynx. Yeah. Yeah. We had a Lynx. Get a load of this, Al. We had a Lynx.
Yeah, it was the world car.
Yeah, we had a Lynx wagon, and I think I had a Lynx GT, and I think it was an '85. Remember, we had the guy on several episodes, like episode 28. He was on with his Escort GT. Well, I had the Lynx version of that, and one of the worst vehicles I've ever owned. And I think I had it for about a year and a half, and my dad, who, as you know, had gotten that car through the Ford dealership on the A plan or the Z plan or whatever it was, he just finally said, you know what, we're going to take this up to whoever the local dealer was at the time, and we're going to hand them the keys and say, it's your problem now, fix it. And I think that's what we did. We basically said, take it from here.
Yeah, you didn't even have the 2300 you had in the Fairmont. That was a whopping 1.6 liter.
Yeah,
with a 1-barrel carburetor on it.
Yeah, but
and if it wasn't automatic, it was a super dog.
I don't know what they put in the Futura. Totally different vehicle. Totally better. Again, we're totally down a rabbit chute, but we're going to look for you on our Facebook page to post a photo of your first car and just kind of lay it out there. Be proud of it, even if it was totally a junker. I mean, that's what we want you to share, and we know we're going to get some interesting ones. I've already got some good photos we're going to share up there. So that will put the wraps on this episode. Gentlemen, you have yourselves a great Thanksgiving. For Michigan's Auto Talk podcast, I am producer Phil Tower.
I'm John Puhek.
I'm Al Schwinkendorf.
Thanks for listening.